Hi, I'm Stephanie. For our stock value project that Aaron and I did, we took a look at Airbnb stock. A lot of the data that we got for a project was from a Reuters report that was published on June 26th this year. We're probably going to take a look and see if they came out with one for July before we turn this in August, just to see if any numbers that we took got changed significantly. One calculation that we are going to walk through is the operating margin. This value measures the percentage of the company's revenues that are left over after paying all of the operating expenses. Here's kind of how we calculated it. So to get the operating margin, you look at the operating income and you divide it by the total revenue and then multiply it by 100 to get it as a percentage. From that report, we found that the operating income was actually negative 1,310, and then our total revenue was 3,000, about 400. So that actually ended up at a negative percentage for operating margin. One thing that was kind of unique and presented a little bit of a challenge for finding data was that Airbnb does not pay dividends. A dividend is an annual or quarterly payment from the company to its investors. The company board of directors can choose not to pay dividends so that they can keep more money for themselves to invest in their future. The A lot of people don't like investing in companies that don't pay dividends because then they're not getting money back as fast. But it actually can become more desirable for some investors because once that company does decide to pay dividends, then that demand increases and then the stock price will increase significantly. And so that's why a lot of people are investing right now, or is kind of for that hope for the future to increase everyone's desire to get it, and then it'll raise the stock price, and then when they want to sell it, they'll make a lot more. We gave Airbnb a financial strength of a B plus. So in order to get this value, we took a look at last year's report where they gave it a B plus, and they kind of gave it that because they were doing okay. We took a look at how they did with COVID because that took a hit on a lot of companies. For Airbnb, it took a hit at the beginning, but then they kind of found their way back because a lot of people didn't really want to go to a hotel and they still wanted to travel, and they found that Airbnb was a really great way that they could do that. Um, this next slide, so this is a chart that we got from that report as well. So it kind of shows how the stock was doing at the end of 2020 and then going all through this year. This is like going through the price. So because there wasn't really a lot of change we saw, or it like increased and then it decreased again, that's why we kept the financial strength to be about the same as it was in the past year. So that's all from my section, and I'll pass it off to Aaron to tell you guys about the rest of it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Now I'm going to move on to discuss some very important financial aspects of Airbnb and walk you through how I calculated and made those decisions for the projection of 2021. Starting off, we're moving into the quarterly revenue. So, why is quarterly revenue important? Well, quarterly revenue indicates financial health. It shows quarter by quarter, month by month, obviously in roughly 3 month periods, what is important for the company in terms of how their revenue is both expanding, how they're getting, are they getting more revenue? Are they getting less revenue? What that means for their fiscal year and how their prices are going to adjust accordingly. So looking at 2020, these are the official numbers. For Q1, they were at 841.8 million. For Q2, they dipped heavily, 334.8 million. For Q3, they were over 1.3 billion. And for Q4, they're at 859.3 million for an overall of 3.38 billion. Now, this was during a pandemic. These are pretty decent numbers for Airbnb. People are still getting out, utilizing their services, And so for 2021, I'm projecting a much bigger uptick. The number for Q1 is already out. 887 million is a fully accurate number. And so for Q2, as the summertime approaches, I was projecting around just over a 10% uptick, just under a 10% uptick into 950 million. Moving in, I additionally think it's going to just keep getting better and better for them. I think this is going to be a record year. So Q3, again, just around a 10% uptick, taking them to 1.2 billion, just a little bit under their Q3 numbers for 2020. So I think that's very feasible. And then again, a little bit more than 10% going into Q4, a very heavy uptick to 1.6 billion, taking them to 4.8 billion throughout the year. Now, for capital structure, why is capital structure important? Well, it increases the ability to create wealth opportunities. Knowing what the total debt is, knowing what long-term debt is, knowing how interest, plays into this picture, all creates wealth opportunities for investors. So, how did these numbers come up? 2.46 billion. Now, that is a big uptick from what we were at in 2020. I believe it was at around 1.8 billion. And so the reason for this is the company is expanding. They need to take on more debt, which, is long-term debt. Obviously, they need to push this debt out to the side, get some inflow in ASAP. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking on more debt. They're expanding after the pandemic. They're opening up their opportunities to make more money. And so it's about a 33% increase, from 1.8 to 2.46. as they expand in both long-term debt categories, but also that affects their long-term interest. Their long-term interest is increasing by roughly 33% from around 74 million in 2020. So I want to adjust accordingly and move it up to 94 million in 2021. And I'm excited to see what these actual numbers are because I think these are pretty accurate. And now finally, I want to talk about the projected stock high and low. Now for high, I put them at $219.94. which is roughly exactly where they were at for their high of 2020. My worry is really in the low category. I projected a low of $133.72. As of today, which is, July 14th, they're at $137.40. So the importance of projecting the stock high and low is to understand their ability to earn profits in terms of an investing standpoint. And so the high should be feasible, which means it's a good time to invest right now at $137. There's plenty of room for growth, but the low is maybe yet to come. Sitting at 137, it could easily dip below that 133.72 value, but we will see. So these are just some of the reasons why we calculated these figures, how we calculated them, why they're important. And so we hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.